The battlefield of eastern Ukraine had been quiet 4 days, eerily quiet. Recon drones circled endlessly above scorched fields and shattered villages, watching, listening, waiting. Ukrainian commanders suspected something unusual was coming, but even they weren't prepared for the intelligence reports that arrived at dawn. Satellite imagery revealed it first, a long armored column, crawling its way through occupied territory, moving slowly, deliberately, toward the front lines. These weren't Russian tanks, they were foreign. Analysts confirmed it within hours. North Korea had deployed one of its long-awaited tank convoys to bolster Russian forces in Ukraine. For Kyiv, this was more than just another battlefield development. It was proof that the war had expanded beyond the regional fight everyone once thought it was. North Korean steel, forged thousands of miles away, was now rumbling toward the trenches of Ukraine. But instead of panic, Ukraine saw an opportunity. Commanders devised a trap. Ukrainian forces would let the convoy enter deeper, into contested ground stretching itself across narrow roads and open terrain before striking with precision. Every unit, from artillery crews to drone operators, was briefed. The plan wasn't just to stop the tanks, it was to annihilate them. The convoy finally crossed into the kill zone under a pale grey sky. A column of over 24 North Korean tanks, some antiquated, others newly supplied, rolled forward with confidence. Dust clouds rose behind their treads, and infantry fighting vehicles followed in tight formation. From a distance, it looked intimidating, but to Ukrainian gunners watching through thermal scopes, it looked like prey. The first strike came suddenly, an anti-tank missile screaming in from a hidden position, slamming into the lead vehicle. The explosion lit up the morning, fire and steel shooting skyward. Before the convoy could react, a swarm of drones descended, dropping explosives directly onto turret hatches. Chaos spread instantly. Tank crews scrambled, some abandoning their vehicles, others trying desperately to turn their guns toward invisible enemies. But each time a hatch opened, Ukrainian sharpshooters had their targets. Still, the convoy pressed forward, clinging to the idea that sheer numbers could overwhelm Ukrainian resistance. What they didn't know was that the true strike hadn't even begun yet. On a ridge a few kilometers away, Ukrainian artillery waited with coordinates locked. With a single command over the radio, the hillside erupted in flame rockets, shells, and cluster munitions raining down across the convoy. Tanks that survived the initial hits were shredded by shrapnel. Columns broke apart, engines burned, and the open fields became a graveyard of twisted metal. But in the chaos, something unexpected happened. Several tanks broke formation and pushed forward aggressively, as if on a mission beyond survival. Their movements were erratic, almost reckless, forcing Ukrainian units to pause. Commanders quickly realized this wasn't just a simple convoy delivery. These tanks were carrying something more, something that needed to be stopped at all costs. Those tanks charging forward weren't moving blindly. Intelligence officers monitoring intercepted communications realized it almost instantly. This group had been tasked with breaking through Ukrainian defenses, no matter the cost. But why? Drones zoomed in, their high-resolution cameras catching something unusual. The rear hatches of these particular tanks had been modified. They weren't just carrying ammunition or troops, they were transporting sealed containers, lashed down inside armored holds. Containers that, according to signals analysis, were too valuable to risk leaving behind. Ukrainian commanders quickly recalculated. This wasn't just about halting a convoy. This was about intercepting whatever cargo the North Koreans had been ordered to deliver to Russian positions. Orders went out. Do not let those tanks escape the kill zone. The battlefield erupted again. Kamikaze drones dove into the charging column, targeting exposed tracks and engines. One tank burst into flames, its turret ripped away by a secondary explosion. But the others pushed harder, plowing through burning wrecks, firing wildly in every direction. Ukrainian ATGM teams shifted focus, waiting for clear lines of sight. When the moment came, they struck, One missile carved through armor, detonating inside the hull. Another landed squarely on the lead vehicle, flipping it sideways into a ditch. Still, two tanks managed to break out of the chaos, leaving the wreckage behind and tearing across open ground toward Russian-held territory. Every available drone was redirected. FPV operators clenched their controls, maneuvering at blistering speed. On the video feeds, the fleeing tanks grew larger, closer until one drone slammed into the rear armor of the first escapee. The detonation rocked it violently, smoke billowing as the tank screeched to a halt. But the last one kept going. Its engine roared, treads grinding as it reached the tree line. In seconds, it would vanish beyond Ukrainian artillery range. "Track it, don't lose it," came the command. The surviving drone dove low, weaving between trees, its camera catching every desperate movement of the last North Korean tank. Through the canopy, its destination finally became clear: a hidden supply depot just beyond the front, where Russian reinforcements were massing. If that cargo reached the depot, the cost would be catastrophic. The fleeing North Korean tank barreled toward the tree line, its treads tearing through mud and broken earth. The drone operator's heart pounded as the screen shook with every violent maneuver, but the feed remained locked on the target. This was no ordinary escape, it was a desperate delivery. Signals intelligence confirmed it. Encrypted chatter between Russian forward units spiked the moment that last tank made its dash. The words were clipped, urgent, and repeated again and again. "Cargo secured. Critical. Do not fail." Ukrainian analysts froze when one fragment of the intercepted message came through. The containers weren't standard ammunition. They contained experimental munitions, believed to be prototypes North Korea had been testing in secret and now funneling to Russia for battlefield use. If deployed, they could tip the balance in localized fights, allowing Russian forces to break defensive lines. This changed everything. "Do not let that tank reach the depot," the Ukrainian commander ordered, his voice sharp over the comms. Every unit shifted focus. Drones swarmed overhead, artillery recalibrated, and ground teams began to close the distance. But the tank moved like a wounded beast, slower than before, but relentless, as though its crew knew that their mission meant more than their lives. The drone operator dove in, pushing his FPV quadcopter at maximum speed. On the screen, the tank's silhouette loomed larger, but seconds before impact, the vehicle unleashed a defensive countermeasure: small, rapid-fire machine guns mounted to its rear turret, spraying the air with tracers. The drone was shredded mid-air, its feed cutting to static. Gasps rippled through the control center. This wasn't just an old North Korean relic, it had been retrofitted, upgraded, and heavily protected. But Ukraine wasn't out of options. From miles away, a HIMARS battery received fresh coordinates. The operators knew the risk: fire too soon, and the tank could adjust course. Wait too long, and it would disappear into Russian-controlled territory. The order came down: lock in, fire. 6 rockets screamed into the sky, arching over the horizon toward the tree line. Soldiers on the ground covered their ears as the earth trembled from the launches. Seconds ticked by, long, agonizing seconds before the first explosion lit up the forest canopy. One rocket missed, detonating in open ground. Another clipped the tree line, showering branches and dirt. Then the third struck near the tank's path, forcing it to veer hard, treads grinding furiously against the soil. But the last salvo was already in the air, closing fast. The Ukrainian operators leaned forward, eyes fixed on their screens. Would the rockets finish the job, or would that tank, and its deadly cargo, slip into Russian hands? The sky cracked open with fire as the final HIMARS rocket screamed downward. The tank was nearly at the edge of the forest, its turret swinging desperately as if it could somehow outpace guided precision. The crew had pushed their machine to its absolute limits, black smoke billowing from the rear engine as the vehicle clawed forward. Then impact. The first warhead detonated just meters away, blasting earth and steel into the air. The tank rocked violently, but kept moving, its armor scorched and scarred. The second rocket hit closer, tearing through the tree line, collapsing trunks onto its path. For a heartbeat, it looked as if the monster would keep crawling, dragging itself toward the Russian depot, but the third strike landed true. A thunderous explosion swallowed the tank in flame. Fire rolled upward, twisting branches into ash, and the shockwave rippled across the ground. Ukrainian operators stared at their screens, trying to confirm the kill, but the dust and smoke clouded everything. Then came a secondary blast larger, deeper, sharper than the first. Not just fuel or ammunition cooking off. This was something more volatile. The sealed containers inside had detonated. 4 miles around, the forest lit up like a furnace. The blast radius shredded nearby trees and scattered burning debris across the sky. Drone footage captured the plume rising, a dark column spiraling high into the clouds. In the command center, officers exchanged quick, grim glances. The detonation confirmed what they already feared. Those containers hadn't just been carrying experimental shells. They were carrying something unstable, something never meant for this battlefield. And if that was only one shipment, how many more were already on the move? Within hours, intercepted chatter revealed Russian logistics convoys repositioning, pulling deeper into occupied zones. More North Korean armor was being prepared. The destroyed tank had only been the spearhead of a larger supply chain, one designed to funnel unconventional weaponry straight into Russia's war effort. Ukraine had won this round, but the fight was far from over. Ukrainian intelligence knew they couldn't simply wait for the next convoy. This wasn't just about defending positions anymore, it was about hunting down every shipment before it reached the front. Plans were already forming: drone swarms, sabotage missions, and deeper strikes across enemy-held roads. Because one truth was now undeniable: North Korea wasn't just a distant supporter. It had become an active supplier, embedding itself directly into the war. And the next confrontation would be even deadlier. The explosion site still smoldered when reconnaissance drones began sweeping wider. At first, they expected silence, just wreckage. But the feed showed something chilling: Russian recovery teams already moving toward the blast zone. Trucks, armored carriers, even engineering vehicles, all pushing forward to collect whatever fragments remained of the destroyed cargo. This wasn't just a battlefield skirmish, it was a signal. Russia and its North Korean partners were desperate to protect and retrieve even the smallest trace of those experimental munitions. They weren't giving up. In Kyiv, intelligence officers convened in an emergency session. The data painted a clear picture. The destroyed tank convoy had been only one element of a broader strategy. Satellite tracking revealed multiple routes stretching from Russian control ports, moving westward. Convoys of supply trucks, reinforced with heavy armor, were weaving their way toward the front lines, and most of them followed a pattern-timed movements under night cover, escorted by mobile air defense systems designed specifically to counter Ukrainian drones. Ukraine faced a dilemma. Direct artillery strikes were too costly, unpredictable. Airstrikes risked interception, but letting the shipments move unchecked was unthinkable. So the decision came: hit them before they disperse. Special operations teams were deployed. These weren't large battalions, just small, highly mobile units, armed with anti-tank missiles, loitering drones, and the experience of years of asymmetric warfare. Their mission was clear: infiltrate deep into contested territory, intercept the convoys at choke points, and leave nothing behind. The first strike team moved under cover of night, slipping through ruined villages and abandoned industrial sites. Their path mirrored the convoy's projected route. Every step forward carried the weight of urgency. If they were late, the trucks would vanish into fortified Russian depots. Meanwhile, overhead, long-range drones circled high above the clouds, beaming live imagery back to Ukrainian command. They spotted it, headlights snaking through the dark. Dozens of vehicles, each covered by camouflaged netting, moving with mechanical precision down a narrow forest road. The operators whispered their confirmations. It was them, the next shipment. And this time, Ukraine wasn't going to let even a single truck slip away. Engines rumbled in the distance as the convoy drew closer, their headlights faintly cutting through the mist of the forest road. Through night vision scopes, Ukrainian Special Forces could see the outlines of armored escorts BTRs at the front and rear, with supply trucks sandwiched between. Each vehicle moved slowly, deliberately, as if expecting something to happen at any moment. Then the drones confirmed what analysts had feared. These weren't ordinary convoys. Mounted on several trucks were North Korean Shilka-style anti-air systems, upgraded with makeshift radar jammers designed to scramble Ukrainian drone signals. It was a crude but dangerous adaptation proof that Russia and North Korea had learned from the previous ambush. The strike team waited in silence, every man and woman pressed flat against the frozen ground. They had rehearsed this for weeks, but nothing could prepare them for the weight of this moment. A single mistake would expose their position and turn them into targets for the convoy's overwhelming firepower. The commander raised a hand. High above, a loitering drone angled downward, its camera zeroing in on the convoy's center. Static flickered across the feed. The jammers were working. The operators knew they might have only seconds before losing control. Launch now. The order came through. From the tree line to anti-tank missiles streaked forward, fiery trails cutting through the night. The first slammed into the lead BTR, flipping it sideways in a burst of steel and flame. The second hit one of the jamming trucks, engulfing it instantly in a massive explosion. The forest erupted in chaos. Russian troops scrambled from their vehicles, spraying gunfire blindly into the trees. The convoy split in two half, reversing down the road, the rest accelerating forward, desperate to punch through. But the Ukrainians had prepared for that. Detonation wires hidden along the roadside lit up in a chain reaction. The blast sent dirt and shrapnel skyward, shredding tires and scattering vehicles into the ditch. Flames spread quickly as trucks carrying volatile cargo ignited, painting the night in orange fire. Yet through the smoke, one vehicle pressed forward, a heavily reinforced tank transporter carrying an oversized container. Its crew ignored the flames around them, accelerating into the chaos, determined to push through at all costs. The Ukrainian commander recognized it instantly. That container was different, larger, stronger, protected. Target that one. Do not let it through. Operators adjusted, drones dove, and the entire strike team shifted their fire onto the transporter. But the vehicle kept moving, shrugging off hits. Its armor designed to survive exactly this kind of ambush. Whatever was inside that container, Russia and North Korea needed it delivered. And Ukraine was seconds away from either stopping it or watching it slip into the shadows of occupied territory. The reinforced transporter roared forward, its massive treads chewing through mud and debris. The flames of burning trucks reflected off its steel hull as tracer rounds bounced uselessly off its plating. Ukrainian operators focused every weapon they had, ATGMs, drones, even grenade launchers, but nothing seemed to stop it. Then the commander made a decision: bring in the Storm Shadow. At first, the team thought they'd misheard. Long-range cruise missiles weren't typically deployed for tactical strikes on moving convoys. But Kyiv had given the order hours earlier, anticipating exactly this kind of scenario. The transporter wasn't just another delivery, it was the crown jewel. High above the clouds, far from the battlefield, the missile was already in flight. Guided by satellite data and ground reconnaissance, it carved through the night sky at near supersonic speed. The convoy never saw it coming. The impact was apocalyptic. A white-hot flash tore across the forest road, swallowing the transporter in a fireball that dwarfed everything around it. The shockwave ripped trees from their roots, flipped smaller vehicles into ditches, and silenced gunfire instantly. For a moment, the world was nothing but thunder and flame. When the smoke cleared, there was nothing left of the transporter, just a crater smoldering in the earth. The container was gone, obliterated before its contents could ever reach the Russian front. But the secondary explosions told the real story. The blast wasn't just from the missile, it was from whatever had been inside the container. The detonation shook the ground for miles, igniting fires that burned into the night. Ukrainian analysts later concluded the cargo had been experimental munitions, possibly chemical or exotic warheads designed in secret collaboration between Russia and North Korea. By destroying it, Ukraine hadn't just won a battle, they had prevented a new kind of escalation. The surviving Russian escorts fled, abandoning their wrecked convoy to the flames. The Ukrainian drones tracked them until they vanished into the east, leaving behind only scorched earth and silence. In Kiev, the strike was hailed as one of the most daring and decisive operations of the war. A single ambush had not only destroyed a convoy, but had cut off a critical supply chain, sending a clear message to Moscow and Pyongyang alike. No matter what you bring to this battlefield, Ukraine will be waiting. And as dawn broke over the blackened forest, the smoking ruins of the convoy stood as proof that precision, patience, and resolve could turn even the mightiest weapon into ash. The ocean of fire had subsided, but the war was far from over. Ukraine had won this round, but the world knew. The next one was already being prepared.